around an oil rig. Linear synchronous motors that launch a vehicle from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 3 seconds. 9 acres of hidden tunnels. Journey underground, backstage, and backstory at the technological marvel that is Walt Disney World. Next on Modern Marvels.
A vista into a world of wondrous ideas, signifying man's achievement. A step into the future, with predictions of constructive things to come.
Enter a make-believe world spanning some 27,000 acres and brought to life by cutting-edge technology. What was once swampland now boasts the world's largest theme park. The ride technology ranges from space-age centrifuges to enhanced motion vehicles powered by 3,000 psi of hydraulic pressure. And hundreds of audio animatronics live through the power of pneumatics, hydraulics, and electrical systems.
Our technology in the field of robotics really is evolutionary, beginning 40 years ago, and continues today building on that.
Walt Disney World is made up of 4 separate theme parks, each with its own innovations. The first, the 107-acre Magic Kingdom, was born in secrecy when Disney purchased thousands of acres of land anonymously. The Magic Kingdom conceals complex tunnels that are the invisible arteries of the park. Transportation, costuming, computer controls, and even a high-speed garbage collection system are all hidden 14 feet below ground. Epcot, which is 3 times the size of the Magic Kingdom, is a never-ending World's Fair, a tribute to science, technology, and world culture. At the entrance soars the 18-story tall Spaceship Earth, a 16 million-pound geodesic sphere glittering with 11,000 facets. A new attraction called Soarin' gives visitors the sights, smells, and best of all, the feel of hang gliding over California. And at the end of every day, the Illumination Show unleashes propane flames and over 1,000 computer-timed fireworks and sends a 350,000-pound bow spinning across the park's central lagoon.
That particular sequence of pyrotechnic effects had never been attempted before.
Just a few miles away, Disney MGM Studios is a salute to the golden days of Hollywood. The Twilight Zone Tower of Terror is a haunted hotel with one extremely unpredictable elevator. Thanks to an advanced T4 computer program, each lurching journey is completely different.
The computer actually decides for you, and associated with that not only is the motion changed, but all the show elements changed.
The Lights, Motors, Action Extreme Stunt Show sends lightweight, high-speed cars spinning 540 degrees and sailing off ramps both forward and backward. The newest park, the 500-acre Disney's Animal Kingdom, is almost 5 times the size of the Magic Kingdom. Disney planted 4 million plants to turn a Central Florida cow pasture into an African savanna. And the park's central icon has a very unusual structural support, an oil rig. On the 100-acre safari ride, African animals look like they're wandering free.
In fact, it is a show set. It's a series of scenes that have been constructed through the manipulation of the landscape environment.
Disney's Animal Kingdom is also home to Expedition Everest. At nearly 200 feet tall, it towers over Disney's other mountains, Thunder, Space, and Splash, and is home to a high-tech, high-speed roller coaster. The 4 parks are all part of this megaplex of a resort. Twice the size of Manhattan, it was the final vision and crowning achievement of a man who spent more than 40 years pushing the limits of technology to create entertainment magic. Walt Disney. Born in 1901, Walter Elias Disney spent his youth in Missouri. From an early age, Walt wanted to be a cartoonist, and by his 20s, he had his own Hollywood animation studio. partner was his brother Roy, who ran the business side of the operation. From the very beginning, Walt used cutting-edge technology to create more compelling stories. In 1928, he produced Steamboat Willie, the world's first animated talkie. In 1932, he dazzled audiences with Flowers and Trees, the world's first cartoon in Technicolor, and the first to win an Oscar. And with Snow White, he proved that animation was strong enough to carry a feature-length film.
I said, how do you do?
How do you do what?
He was about creating ever-increasingly immersive stories. So he took storybooks and created animated films. In each of those animated films, he continued to push innovative ways to increase the immersion into those films. So stereo sound, color, feature length.
He always hired the best, and Walt was always pushing them to do more and more and plus it, as they said, plus it in the way that the scenes are done and the way the animation moves, and they did better work than they thought they were capable of.
He may have been an artist, but Disney thought like an engineer. When he wanted to create a greater depth of field in his animated films, and thus a greater sense of realism, he worked with his staff to come up with a solution. In just a few months, they invented and patented a sophisticated animation camera called the multiplane camera.
The individual pieces of artwork are stacked certain distances apart depending how deep you want the scene to look, and the camera is placed above, and the pieces of artwork are moved in towards the camera to simulate the camera panning through dimensional space.
Walt's next leap in storytelling took him out of the animator studio and into a California orange grove. In the early 1940s, as he sat on a dirty park bench and watched his daughters ride a carousel, Walt had an idea.
There should be something built, some kind of a amusement enterprise built where the parents and the children could have fun together.
He decided to create a place unlike anything the world had ever seen. In 1953, he purchased 160 acres near Anaheim, California, and set about building the world's first theme park. He gathered up some of his most creative talent and dubbed them Imagineers.
On our first television program, we showed you a blueprint for a dream. Well, this is a blueprint, and the dream is Disneyland.
Walt decided early on that the park's various attractions should radiate outward from a convenient central hub. Guests would be drawn to the hub by a dramatic landmark. And given the success of Disney's first feature-length animated film, Snow White, the landmark had to be a castle. This soaring castle would be surrounded by rides themed to Disney movies. Park construction began July 21st, 1954 at a feverish pace.
The early days of the construction of Disneyland seemed sort of like a heartless test. It was nothing but a bunch of orange trees coming down and dirt and bulldozers and chaos and construction equipment and cement trucks. I've never seen so much madness in my life.
The park opened less than 1 year later with all the fanfare Walt Disney could muster. But it was far from his greatest premiere.
It was a disaster. In the first place, Walt could control everything except the weather. And it was one of the hottest days of the year in Anaheim. So the women's spiked heels were sinking into the freshly laid asphalt. They ran out of soft drinks. There were not enough drinking fountains. The rides broke down. Some smart fellow counterfeited about 10,000 tickets. And so the place was jammed and it was a mess.
The next day it was like, oh my goodness, we have to go down there again. Everything's broken. We're going to have to take it apart. We're going to have to fix it. And we were in for a long summer.
The summer wasn't that long. After a few weeks of ironing out the kinks, Walt's new park became a smash hit. Every day, thousands of people came to see mechanical animals lurking in the jungle, Dumbos that really flew, and a 5/8 scale Main Street that felt like the real thing. Once again, Walt had succeeded in combining technology with great storytelling.
Theme park is the first experience wherein the audience can actually walk through frame into the story and participate in that story in a way that was entirely unique. It went from being a passive experience to an active experience.
Disneyland was an unqualified success, but Walt still wasn't satisfied. Outside the gates of his carefully constructed make-believe world, a disorganized mass of hotels, motor courts, and diners sprang up, breaking the Disney magic. And inside, practical concerns like garbage collection and employee transportation also spoiled the illusion. Walt knew he could do better, and he vowed to. It was 1964, and something strange was going on in the central part of Florida. Large parcels of useless swampland near the tiny town of Orlando were being bought up, but nobody knew why, or by whom.
There was a lot of speculation in the Central Florida area as to who was purchasing that much land, why would they be doing it.
Floridians may have been in the dark, but out in California, Walt Disney knew exactly what was going on. In a cloak and dagger mission rivaling the best spy novels, he was acquiring land for a massive new theme park that would dwarf Disneyland.
Walt Disney's name was pretty well known to the general public, and certainly if it had been released that Walt was purchasing that much property here in Florida, well, that certainly would have changed the price tag.
Walt chose Orlando because it offered year-round good weather, easy access to major roads, and thousands of acres of land at only $180 an acre. Using false company names like Tomahawk Properties and Latin American Development, Walt and his representatives shuttled in and out of Central Florida, carefully covering the tracks.
He hired attorney Bob Foster to, not under the Disney name, come in and acquire much of the land. Bob would always return to California, traveling through different airports along the way.
Finally, in the fall of 1965, the Orlando newspaper got the scoop. "We Say It's Disney" screamed a huge headline. Neighboring swampland immediately shot up to $1,000 an acre. The Florida Project, all 27,443 acres of it, was out in the open. At a hastily arranged press conference, along with the governor of Florida, Walt announced the huge undertaking. He wasn't just building an East Coast Disneyland. He was creating an entire Disney World, his most ambitious and technologically innovative enterprise ever. But the project almost died before the first shovelful of earth was turned. Coming up, Walt's dream is put on hold, while the Imagineers grapple with whether to press on in the face of an unforeseen crisis. Due to success of Disneyland and Walt Disney World, more Disney destinations were built in Paris, Tokyo, and Hong Kong. Modern Marvels, Walt Disney World will return in a moment. In 1966, Walt Disney launched the biggest project of his career, a massive theme park situated in the middle of 27,000 acres in Central Florida.
Well, you can see on the master plan, the theme park and all the other tourist facilities fill just one small area of our enormous Florida project.
Walt envisioned several theme parks, hotels, golf courses, and thousands of acres left their natural state. His dreams were every bit as big as the acreage he purchased. But he'd never see these dreams completed. On December 15, 1966, Walt Disney died from cancer.
The first few months after Walt died, it was sort of like, well, Walt's just away. I'm sorry. Walt's just away for a while. We'll be back from a vacation, and then we'll get on with the next things that we're going to do.
The Disney company was devastated. Without their charismatic leader, many felt Disney World couldn't be built.
It took us about a year to convince Roy O. Disney and the rest of the management of the Walt Disney Company that there was a lot of talent here that worked with Walt Disney for many years and that we could do this project.
Finally, in 1967, Roy Disney, Walt's brother and business partner, decided to move ahead with Disney World. The first project would be a theme park modeled after Disneyland, but more than twice as large. It would be called the Magic Kingdom. Construction officially began in April of 1969. But the Magic Kingdom didn't happen with a wave of the wand. It was more like a military conquest. In fact, the battle to build Walt Disney World and the Magic Kingdom was commanded by a Navy admiral and an Army general. General Joe Potter had overseen the operation of the Panama Canal and the 1964 World's Fair, and Admiral Joe Fowler had built Disneyland for Walt a decade before.
They weren't perfect for the job. Joe Fowler was especially perfect from a construction standpoint because he understood how to work with the Imagineers and all the creative talent and all the engineers.
Their first challenge was to convert hundreds of acres of swampy land into rolling hills and sparkling waterways. They started by digging into Bay Lake, 400 acres of reeds, muck, and swamp grass lined with 14 feet of rotted roots.
They drained the lake and went down and dug out a good layer of muck and mire that was down at the lake bottom.
After 18 months of moving more than 8 million cubic yards of dirt, the largest private construction project in the country, they were ready to pour concrete. But the concrete work wasn't for any of the landmark structures visitors today would recognize. In fact, it wasn't for structures any guests were ever supposed to see. Back during the early days of Disneyland, Walt once saw a Frontierland cowboy sauntering through Tomorrowland, which utterly destroyed the futuristic sci-fi mood. To avoid that kind of culture clash at Walt Disney World, the Imagineers designed a network of tunnels to serve the park. They were called utilidors, utility corridors. Because the water table in Central Florida is only 2 feet below ground level, the Imagineers built the utilidors on top of the ground rather than under it.
They are on ground level. They are the first floor of Magic Kingdom. Then Magic Kingdom Park was built on the second and third stories on top of that.
The Magic Kingdom is actually 14 feet above where the original elevation was.
The utilidors made possible to walk from one end of the park to the other in just 10 minutes without being seen by guests. Utilidors also did many of the mundane operations that could break the Disney magic.
They have office buildings, facilities, wardrobe, cafeteria.
The tunnels also housed an underground trash collection system, one of the world's biggest vacuum cleaners.
Our engineers found the Swedish system, the AVAC system, which we incorporated to collect trash pneumatically. You know, like those old department store things where the cashiers would take something, put it in a tube, and send it off. It works the same way, and the trash goes from specified points to a central collection area.
With the site prep and underground foundations laid by General Potter's Army, Admiral Joe Fowler was ready to start building the park itself. His big challenge would be what Walt had envisioned as the Magic Kingdom's crowning structure, a towering Cinderella castle. But the castle couldn't be too tall, because Florida law required a flashing red light on any structure higher than 200 feet. Fowler's contractors ordered 600 tons of structural steel and began assembling the castle skeleton. Day by day, the girders rose, hoisted into the Florida sky by giant cranes. To speed the progress, they prefabricated sections of the castle. Not just steel framework, but complete towers and turrets, 18 in all. While on the ground, they were sheathed in fiberglass panels molded to look like stone. Real gold topped 3 of the towers. The highest tower of Cinderella Castle was hoisted and fastened in place 18 months after it was begun, in July of 1971. The castle topped out at 189 feet, just below Florida's height limit of 200 feet. But Disney's Imagineers wanted the Magic Kingdom's castle to look much higher, so they worked a little magic of their own. Optical magic.
Forced perspective is a technique that's been used in filmmaking for many, many years. And it's where you'll take a building and you will scale it differently up close to you. So if you've got a building that's maybe several stories tall, then the windows and the framework will get smaller and smaller. That gives the illusion that the structure is actually bigger than it really is, or further away than it may actually be.
On October 1st, 1971, Roy Disney unveiled Cinderella Castle and the rest of the Magic Kingdom to a crowd of 10,000 people.
Walt Disney World is a tribute to the philosophy and the life of Walter Elias Disney.
Unlike Disneyland's opening 15 years earlier, the event ran like clockwork, proof of both Walt's vision and the Imagineers' technical achievements. But the greatest achievement wasn't creating the park, the tunnels, or even the castle. It was an array of high-tech figures designed by Walt himself 10 years earlier. Disney's contemporary resort was built with modular construction. 9 fun rooms were finished up with built-in furniture 3 miles away, then trucked to the site and slid into place like dresser drawers. Modern marvels, Walt Disney World, will return in a moment. When Walt Disney World opened in 1971, it seemed like the entire East Coast funneled straight into the theme park. Attendance hit 10 million in less than 2 years. People came by the carload to see popular attractions like Jungle Cruise, It's a Small World, and the Hall of Presents. Like their counterparts at Disneyland, they all had one thing in common. They featured what many people consider Walt's greatest legacy: the robotic figures he called audio animatronics. And they owed their existence to the 1964 New York World's Fair. Back in 1961, when Walt Disney heard that a World's Fair was being planned for New York City, he contracted with several major companies to create rides for the fair.
Walt wanted to be able to develop this, and there was a way to get the sponsorship and some of the money to develop the ideas that he had.
One idea he'd been working on for years was robotic figures, which he called audio animatronics, or AAs.
He had visions to where he could build a mechanical, electrical machine and then turn it into a life form that looked realistic and moved you out of that illusion of, well, it's not a machine, but it's got character and it's real and it comes alive.
Walt had built simple pneumatic AA figures and the enchanted Tiki Room show at Disneyland.
What made it so unique was that all the surprises, that you'd be sitting there, all of a sudden the drums would come and the tiki poles would start to animate. And then, of course, the finale when the orchids up and stuff and start singing.
Everything in that theater comes to life, and that was very similar to what he used to do in his animated films, where flowers would sing and birds would talk, etc., and buildings would come to life.
But Walt wanted more. He wanted lifelike human AAs. For years, his Imagineers had been struggling to create an audio animatronic of Walt's favorite president, Abraham Lincoln.
We wanted to bring to the people of today the inspiring words of the man who held this nation together during its moment of greatest crisis, the Civil War.
When Walt started pitching ideas to the World's Fair, one of the World's Fair officials, Robert Moses, was fascinated.
Robert Moses said, "I won't open the fair without Mr. Lincoln."
The trouble was, Lincoln was nowhere close to being operational. The simple system that ran the Tiki Works wasn't advanced enough for Lincoln. To make him seem human, he would need a far more complex mechanism, and it would have to be packed to a very small space. Lincoln's skull, to be precise. As the fair drew closer and closer, Lincoln still wasn't ready.
Walt was very, very upset with it and told me, he says, "Bobby, I want twice as many motions and half as much weight." Not having ever designed humans or animals, there was like a whole new thing, but which we're used to doing whole new things. I immediately saw it as an airplane fuselage with small bearings, small steel framework. In 90 days, I laid out the entire design of it.
Lincoln was given an internal framework with 13 main structural units, all moving in dozens of directions. The articulated motions were powered by large pneumatic servo cylinders. Early tests proved the design could work. Still, there were problems.
Walt was pulling out some of the dignitaries from the state of Illinois to where they could come out and preview what Mr. Lincoln was going to look like. Mr. Lincoln stood up and he started giving a speech. At that time and frame, our hydraulic fluids were red in color. Unfortunately, when he was doing his show, we blew a hydraulic line in the torso of Mr. Lincoln, and then all of a sudden he collapsed, and we had this red dye fluid started to leak through his white shirt. Some of the dignitaries in the audience said, "Oh, you've recreated the assassination of Mr. Lincoln," and Walt wasn't very pleased about that, so from that point on we had to use clear hydraulic fluid.
He made his debut at the World's Fair in April of 1964 to a stunned audience.
There were reports at the New York World Fair that Mr. Lincoln got up off the stage and shook hands with people, but from the Imagineers that I talked to who were there, that never happened. And he essentially was bolted to the floor for the duration of his run.
Just resonated with people in a way that left them very enthusiastic, not only about Mr. Lincoln, but about seeing entertainment robotics in general.
Now that they could make human figures, Disney's Imagineers created hundreds of AAs.
They were traditionally hydraulic or pneumatic figures. This means that they have either fluid going through tubes at high pressure, that's hydraulic, or pneumatic air going through tubes at varying pressure.
As the air or fluid flowed at varying pressures, it triggered the actuators, the mechanisms that cause the automatic motions.
We have what we call Rotex, which is short for rotary actuators. They do a rotary motion of a wrist twist or torso twist. Then we have linear actuators that will do a linear motion.
Actuators power even the tiny facial movements that make AAs so convincing.
We have an actuator that we call a pinch actuator, and it pinches the corner of lips. When you pronounce certain words, the corners of your mouth will pinch. And then the actuator down off the side is what we call a smile actuator. So when those actuators move up and down, they actually pull the lips back and give the look of the figure smiling. Up at the eyes, we have an actuator that can either be digital or analog. That will give you eyes right or left. If they're digital, they're spring-loaded and they will come back to center each time. If they're analog, they will go from point A to B, and we can stop them and control them in any range and point we want.
Better control and thus greater realism was always the goal for AAs. But in the early days of Disney World, that realism required a trade-off of speed.
If we wanted to move the arms real fast, what would happen was that the figure would stop and then it would shake and resonate and go all the way through the whole figure. It looked very natural. So what we would do is we had to slow that function down to where it looked fluid and more natural and not resonate and shake. So we always had to sacrifice speed for control, which drove the animators crazy because they wanted speed and still have control.
The Imagineers created a breakthrough in audio animatronics in the 1980s. By adding a new circuit called compliance, they were able to control the amount of force pushing or pulling on a movement.
We have built-in compliance in the human body to where when my brain says stop, maybe the inertia makes my arm overshoot a little bit and then comes back to where I told it to stop. You know, it looked very natural because that's how the human body works. We did the same thing with an electronic circuit and either pressure transducers or a mechanical Hall effect sensor. We can get that fast speed now, and then it will naturally overshoot and come back that looks very realistic and, you know, fluid like the human body. So with that new technology, we're able to make figures almost look just like us. Sometimes even better.
Today, the Magic Kingdom's AAs populate dozens of attractions. From shows like the Hall of Presidents, where Abe Lincoln still stands and talks,
for 1,000 generations, rejoice,
to adventures like the Jungle Cruise. Each attraction is a precision-timed combination of soundtrack, which includes music, dialogue, and sound effects, and AA motions. The complex animated characters are controlled by the Digital Animation Control System, or DAX. It's located in climate-controlled rooms and tunnels beneath the Magic Kingdom. Electrical cables that run through the tunnels connect the program to the shows, enabling technicians to run the shows from a remote location.
Each one of these is a flash memory card that contains all that data in a non-moving and non-volatile format, so there are no moving parts. As the chip plays, it hands off to the next one, and then hands off to the next one, and so forth, until we have a complete message. We're able to patch into the cards to monitor their performance.
Quality. It's time to respond. Send us a message from somewhere beyond.
Today, a small army of audio animatronic characters populates the Magic Kingdom, some 1,100 in all. It's the kind of creativity and technology Disney's Imagineers would put to work yet again when they tackled their next park. Coming up, building the world's first geodesic sphere and the technology behind Disney's cutting-edge fireworks displays. Disney's audio animatronic figure Lucky the Dinosaur has traveled the globe, making visits to California, Orlando, and Hong Kong. Modern Marvels, Walt Disney World will return in a moment. Epcot is a 300-acre park with two very distinct personalities. One side is a futuristic world dominated by the 180-foot-tall spaceship Earth, one of the biggest geospheres anywhere on our geosphere. At the other end of the park, 11 foreign pavilions ring the World Showcase Lagoon. Given Disney's history with World's Fairs, it's no coincidence.
Epcot is a permanent World's Fair, if you will.
When Disney Imagineers broke ground on Epcot in 1979, they were once again launching the biggest construction project in the United States. 3,000 designers, 22 construction companies, 500 subcontractors, and more than 10,000 workers took on the job. Much of the labor went into constructing Spaceship Earth, a ride inside a giant sphere that was much more challenging to build than the castles that anchor Disney's other parks.
Epcot was a world theme, and we wanted to somehow express that. And so a sphere, looked like the globe of the world, much more so than a golf ball, as it's called from time to time. But it's a very fascinating, complicated building.
Spaceship Earth is the world's first geodesic sphere. Its outside surface is 150,000 square feet, and its inside volume is 2,200,000 cubic feet. The giant sphere is held up by 6 legs, each of which is supported by pylons driven 120 to 185 feet into the ground. At its lowest point, the sphere stands 18 feet off the ground.
We actually hired MIT to engineer and test the wind loads to make sure that it wouldn't become underneath there a wind tunnel that would not be put over.
The sphere is made of more than 11,000 triangles of Lucabond, a thermopolyethylene core bonded to aluminum. 1-inch spacing between the panels allows them to expand and contract in the Florida heat. The spacing also prevents the sphere from becoming a huge water ball when it rains. Water flows between the panels into a gutter system that empties into the World Showcase Lagoon. But Spaceship Earth is hardly the only engineering marvel in Epcot. Connecting Epcot to the Magic Kingdom is Disney's most famous and futuristic mode of transportation, the monorail.
People still look to the monorail as sort of a vision of future transportation. Visualize a bus on a highway and it had wheels on the bottom. Then you put that up on a concrete road in the sky. Maybe it's 2 feet wide. So you take some other wheels and you put them on the side of this concrete road. That keeps it upright.
Disney didn't invent the monorail. It was first patented in the 1820s in Great Britain. But Walt gave the monorail a futuristic makeover.
You remember the Buck Rogers rocket ship where it had a long pointed front, it had these split fins along the side like ski runners, but it had this big wraparound windshield and little portholes, and I thought, that's it. That's all you got to do is do that shape and it'll hide the wheels. Sketched it real quick, came in, made a bigger drawing of it, then a rendering of it. Walt took one look at the rendering and said, can you build that?
They could indeed. The original Disneyland monorail, which gave its first ride to Vice President Richard Nixon in 1959, ran on a track only 4,200 feet long, more a carnival ride than a transportation system. For Walt Disney World, though, Imagineers scaled up the monorail to provide serious transportation.
Walt Disney World, we needed a longer train. So we took basically what I call the original Mark III design that we put into service here in 1968, and we made it wider and we made it longer, and I designed a new body to go on that train that had this sort of Learjet sweeping windshield look to it.
In 1990, the monorail was upgraded again.
It's a fiberglass composite body on a steel frame. And the fiberglass body is built under the same premises as an aircraft body. So the entire body itself, without any equipment on it, weighs about 800 pounds because the weight was a big consideration. They didn't want to increase the weight, but they wanted to increase the capacity, and that's how they did it with the composite bodies.
The new fleet of 12 trains, each made up of 6 cars, increased capacity by 30%. The monorail now carries 50 million people a year. Unlike most conventional trains, which have a single locomotive that pulls all the other cars, each of the monorail trains contains 8 electrical motors, putting out 113 horsepower apiece. They're powered by a 600-volt DC electrical system, which feeds current to an electrified metal bar running the length of the beamway.
It's a large toy electric train. So it picks up power off the beam, it powers DC motors.
It's certainly the most expensive toy train in the world. Building the high-tech, high-rise system cost a staggering $1 million per mile for the 14-mile route, and that's in 1970s dollars. Part of the route runs directly through the lobby of the Contemporary Hotel, but the monorail slips in and out so widely that the hundreds of guests are never disturbed. Try that with a diesel locomotive. Daily servicing takes place in the monorail maintenance facility.
We actually have 3 sections in the shop called dropout beams. One on beam 1, one on beam 10. It's actually pieces of beam that sit down, drop out, and we can roll them out of the way so we can service items under the train.
Because of continuous preventive maintenance, the monorail is amazingly reliable.
We run at about 99.9% efficiency. On our bad months, bad weeks, we run about 99.8%.
Since Walt Disney World first opened, the monorail has hauled over 1 billion riders, making the system the most heavily used monorail in the world.
It worked out to be a very slick system. Looked like the future, still looks like the future.
While the monorail is a Disney adaptation of long-existing technology, one of its newest rides is a brand new concept, invented with the aid of an old director set. The concrete monorail beams were manufactured in Washington State and shipped by rail to Florida. Modern Marvels, Walt Disney World will return in a moment. High-tech transportation abounds at Epcot. The monorail, test track driving, even a trip into outer space. But one of its newest rides uses high-tech motion-based technology to give people a chance to experience something considerably lower tech. Hang gliding.
A sensation that is almost like free flight. It is such a unique experience.
We were able to tell a pretty compelling flight story with fairly high technology and some illusions that are quite unique.
Strapped into bench seats, guests are lifted 40 feet into the air and immersed in a movie shot while hang gliding over California. They feel the breeze, smell the scents, bob and soar with the wind. It's a stunning combination of movie and ride technology. But the project almost died on the drawing board. Disney Imagineers knew they could make a great movie. After all, they'd been in the movie business for decades. The real challenge was in engineering the ride.
One idea was, if you think of going to your dry cleaners and when your clothes go by in the moving rack, we would do something like that where you'd be in a flying harness, sort of suspended and moving along.
Most of the early concepts involved multiple floors of the building. We would have 3 floors, and we would take people up there, put them in this ride vehicle, and somehow move them horizontally out above the screen. The more we studied that, it sort of became very cumbersome because we have to move people up and down stairs or elevators or escalators all day long. And frankly, it was about to sink the attraction. We decided, it's just not going to pencil out.
Then, over Thanksgiving weekend, Imagineer Mark Sumner had an idea. To test it, he dug out one of his childhood toys.
It was an old director set. And I pulled it down out of the attic, blew off the dust, and started going through the pieces. And I thought, there's probably enough pieces here to make a little representation of what I want to demonstrate. So I started putting it together with some string and some wire ties and some hot glue. Over a period of about 3 hours in my garage, I put this little vector set model together.
Back at work on Monday, he sprang his idea on the planning team.
I put this model on the table. I said, how about if we load people here in 3 rows, and then we'll have an electric motor that can then move them up into the screen area. And while they're up there, since we already have this motor, maybe we can move them around, maybe we can swing them back and forth a little bit, and when they're done, we can simply bring them back onto a normal theater environment and let them leave.
And that's just what they did, on a much, much bigger scale.
It takes about 1 million pounds of steel just in the ride system to make it work. But it works just like this. I don't have to turn a crank on the big one. I don't think I could, but we have electric motors that can do that.
These are 1,000 horsepower electric motors and gears that produce a situation where we've got 50 people or so on one lift mechanism. They're sitting out on the end of a big arm that's connected to a big device that moves in and out.
But the heavy-duty engineering is all about ultra-light flight.
We want them to have that feeling that they're really flying on a hang-gliding experience. They're not on a 30-ton monster that's moving them up in the air.
To enhance the realism of the ride, to plus it, as Walt used to say, they added subtle touches like wind and scent to match the movie scenery.
So what we ended up with was this aluminum wing. It's built much like an airplane wing that is raised when you sit down, but then just before you lift off, it comes down. Built into that for each guest is a variable speed fan, and it's actually behind them, and it's very quiet. And inside the wing, we've designed these air chambers that actually bring it around to the front and will blow wind in your face. We can vary the wind pressure to match the scene. When we decided to add the scents, to add a little extra, we found out that we could take our boxes. We have mechanisms that will inject scents, and we actually inject that into each of the fans. So it's not like it's overbearing, it just sort of is in the wind like it would be if you were actually hang gliding.
Now it's one of the most popular rides at Epcot.
You can go to a movie, you can go on a ride. How often do you combine the two?
Night after night, 365 days a year, Walt Disney World explodes with fireworks. In fact, the resort is the world's largest consumer of fireworks, burning through roughly 1 million shells a year. At Epcot, the nightly fireworks show fires off 1,105 individual shells. They're launched from 750 mortar tubes and 56 firing modules located at 34 positions around the lagoon. Most of them, though, are launched from 4 floating barges, which are loaded early each morning in a backstage lagoon. But this show is much more than fireworks. Music, lasers, jets of fire, fountains, and a 28-foot globe combine to create an aerial display unlike any other.
The most fascinating thing for me about this show is the ability for everything to work together electronically and for the precision timing that you can achieve during the fireworks show.
An array of 26 computers runs the show. The pinpoint choreography is made possible by electronic firing switches that launch the fireworks and timed fuses that ignite them in the air. Disney is also beginning to use a new technique, compressed air.
Air launch replaces that black powder bag with compressed air, so it's actually like a giant pea shooter. And we shoot the shell up into the sky using compressed air. Because we are using compressed air, we can control the amount of pressure, and the amount of pressure determines how high the shell will go.
Once the shell is airborne, another layer of even more sophisticated technology kicks in. An electronic chip on each shell controls its explosion with split-second precision. Down below, the 150,000-pound Inferno barge shoots blasts of flame so huge that spectators can feel the heat.
We have liquid propane that we store on board the Inferno barge. And again, that's a lot of firepower, so we had to figure out how to do that safely. The idea was to make it a pontoon-style barge and put the propane tanks down under the water, so there's no risk of them catching fire or getting overheated during the show.
Figuring out how to create the fire effects took a lot of experimentation.
We took an area in the back part of the property and we gathered a bunch of buckets and old tin cans and fire hoses and pipes and just started shooting streams of liquid propane into these different devices to generate different styles of splashes or tubes or any type of array of liquid that we could think about, and then lit on fire and see what they looked like. We used to joke it was like every 12-year-old boy's dream come true to go out in the backyard and play with fire and do things that you really shouldn't be doing.
Balancing out all that fire is water. 4 fountain barges fitted with a total of 160 water nozzles pump 16,000 gallons of water per minute in the form of columns that dance and leap as high as 40 feet. But the undisputed star of the show is the most complex piece of show equipment ever built by Disney's Imagineers. The Earth Globe is the world's first and only spherical LED video screen. 15,000 individual LEDs on the globe's continents flash up nearly 300 images of art, nature, and humanity, all synced to the show's music and narration. On board the barge are 6 computer processors to generate the video signals, fire off the 258 strobe lights, and control the globe's other special effects. It took a year to build the globe and its barge. Then the 175-ton sphere had to be hauled into place.
The barge was actually set up about a big tractor-trailer truck with 18 or 20 hydraulically controlled axles. Each one was independent. It took us about 2 days to move the barge from the north end of the property to here. Then we had a 400-ton crane that set up on the other side of the lagoon over here. We picked the barge up and we set it down in the water. We set it up in a low part of the lagoon, so if for some reason the barge sank to the bottom, nobody would notice and we would have had time to recover. But luckily it floated, sat down in the water, everything was fine.
The barge made its debut in 2000. While Epcot uses technology and innovation to promote a vision of high-tech world harmony, Disney MGM Studios uses the same means to create groundbreaking thrills. When Modern Marvels returns, a high-tech elevator ride with a mind of its own. And roller coaster technology so advanced, the military is experimenting with it to launch fighter jets. There's almost half a mile of propane gas piping in the Inferno barge. Modern Marvels Walt Disney World will return in a moment. By the 1980s, with attendance at both the Magic Kingdom and Epcot swelling, Disney Imagineers decided to create another theme park. Once again, they set out to surpass their earlier work, to plus it, as Walt would say. And once again, they took their inspiration from Walt himself. They returned to his roots in the motion picture business and created the Disney MGM Studios.
It's everything about show business, how it's done, nostalgic tribute to it. It's about Hollywood, it's about Broadway, it's about radio, it's about television, and especially movies.
At Disney MGM Studios, the Imagineers set out to create their most technologically complex ride to date. The Imagineers wanted to combine a haunted hotel setting with a dramatic sensation of falling. The result was a haunted elevator ride with a mind of its own. The Twilight Zone Tower of Terror.
There's nothing more fearful, I think, for many people than the notion of an elevator, out of control.
Creating this thrill ride required groundbreaking technology, combining 2 different types of rides into one.
It was one of the most ambitious from a technical standpoint that we've ever undertaken. If you think about a normal ride, it's one ride system. We have multiple motions.
The ride begins with a smooth ascent. But then the doors open and the ride vehicle moves horizontally into the dark corridors of the haunted hotel.
We have a completely different ride system that moves them horizontally in the attraction.
Creating the horizontal movement was easy enough. Disney turned to a technology they used before to control vehicles without operators, tracks, or rails: wire-guided vehicles.
The vehicle is actually equipped with a sensor plate underneath here that rides very close to the floor surface, and it picks up computer signals from the wire to guide the vehicle, wire guidance system, to guide the vehicle along its path. It tells it speed, direction, it reverses forward, it actually even turns aside. So there's a lot of signals that can be transmitted between the two that actually tell the vehicle how to move its positioning.
Then suddenly, the ride lurches into a series of hair-raising lifts and drops.
We built this ride system that would move up and down very quickly. We take this very controlled ride system and make you think it's out of control.
The Twilight Zone Tower of Terror opened on July 22nd, 1994, to piercing screams and rave reviews. But the designers couldn't help asking, how can we plus it?
One of our executives asked how difficult it would be if we wanted to make an adjustment on the ride profile. And our programmer said it wouldn't be that difficult at all. And suddenly a light bulb went off, and we realized, wait a minute, we have created an attraction that can be reprogrammed.
In 2002, Disney unveiled a fourth version of the ride. They called it T4, adding the ominous tagline, "The Tower's in control." 2 years, countless calculations, and several computer upgrades in making, T4 includes 6 to 8 dizzying drops and lifts at various heights. But the exact number and sequence are generated randomly inside the computer. Each ride is different.
Not only is the motion changed, but all the show elements change. You'll see different shows, you'll see different audio, different lighting techniques.
The ride quickly became one of the most popular in all of Walt Disney World. Just around the corner from the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror is ride technology of a totally different sort. The Rock and Roller Coaster is to conventional coasters what an F-18 Hornet is to a single-engine prop plane. Instead of slowly hauling its way up a long, slow climb, this coaster takes off like a rocket.
It launches guests in this superstretch limo from 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds.
And you're immediately going into an inversion. You got some loops, you got some surprises all in the dark. At the same time, you're seeing landmarks flipping by. It's about speed, it's about thrill, and it's about music. It's combining all three into one experience.
The Rock and Roller Coaster's launch system is actually a series of powerful electromagnets synchronized to pull the car forward at ever-increasing speeds. Called linear synchronous motors, the technology is now being explored by the Navy as a better way to catapult planes off of aircraft carriers, and by NASA as a more efficient way to launch space vehicles. Surprisingly, this high-tech launch technology is descended from a transportation system first unveiled by Walt Disney at the New York World's Fair, and later upgraded for the Magic Kingdom.
We designed and built the Walt Disney World and People Mover. It was silent running and had no moving parts because the track had embedded in it a series of magnets, so that as each car would come across these magnets, the power would turn on and off and just urge the car smoothly along the track.
450 linear induction motors propel the People Mover, which is still smoothly running at Walt Disney World at a stately 7 miles an hour. Enter the turbocharged cousin of that technology called linear synchronous motors, or LSMs. LSMs accelerate the firing of the electromagnets along the track, turning a plodding magnetic ripple into a screaming tsunami. And anything surfing that tsunami can be accelerated to a speed limited only by the bursts of electrical current and the physical limits of ride vehicles and their occupants.
There's so much power you can get out of a linear motor. With a linear motor, you can literally be magnetically squirted out into space with no chain or anything. That's the big advantage of linear motor.
Whether you're the first car or the last, the songs match the scenery.
Each onboard audio system also has unique sensors on the ride vehicles, and they correspond with cues that are given along the ride path. And that tells the system what tracks to play. It's a big complex matrix of amplifiers and speakers and crossovers. So we're separating highs, mid-ranges, and lows. You can tell there are speakers right beside your head, almost like an earphone, and there's a subwoofer underneath your seat, so you're really immersed in this audio experience.
Not all the vehicles in Walt Disney World are attached to a track. Coming up, Disney's Imagineers attempt to harness the kinetic energy and unpredictable thrills of a Hollywood car chase. Producer Jack Douglas scored the music for the Rock and Roller Coaster by riding it like 100 times with a computer strapped to his knees. Modern Marvel's Walt Disney World will return in a moment. Disney Imagineers were planning the Disney MGM Studios theme park, they knew they wanted to stage some sort of stunt show. But the question was, how? They had plenty of experience designing and building things like roller coasters, monorails, and animatronics, but those were all pre-programmed and highly controlled. How could they bring that level of control and precision to something as kinetic and unpredictable as a car chase?
How do we make this something that can perform day in and day out and be very consistent?
And inventing and building the technology to make such an attraction possible was only the beginning.
A lot of science went into designing the way we're going to stage everything.
Creating the show began with finding the right location. In this case, a 5-acre corner of the park that was ripe for redevelopment. There was only one problem. A canal went through the site.
We had to move the canal in order to make room for it. But that kind of obstacle is something that, we face probably every time we build something.
Once the engineers redirected the canal, the Imagineers began building a 177,000 square foot arena that included a 5,000-seat stadium. First, they poured concrete footers 4 feet deep to support bridges and ramps. Beneath it all, the Imagineers buried a pit big enough to hold liquid propane.
We do have a pit that all the accumulators are for the LP gas, which are fed from a fuel farm, which holds propane, which fuel these accumulators.
Most of that firepower would be reserved for the show's planned finale, a spectacular display of stunts, thrills, and explosions.
We have a finale, which is 6 large compressed LP gas accumulators that blow off. They put about a 45 to 65-foot fireball in the air for the finale.
But what would the Hollywood car chase be without a gunfight? Obviously, real guns were out of the question, so the Imagineers turned to one of their most trusted technologies, pneumatics.
We also have what we call bullet hits, which are pneumatic, which are compressed air in the set piece, so that when the villain shoots at the hero, you see water shooting up out of the ground, which is basically compressed air with a water socket full.
Once the stage was underway, the Imagineers went to work on the ride vehicles. Although in this case, the vehicles wouldn't be ridden by visitors, they'd be driven by stuntmen. Because of all the jumping and spinning they would have to do, the cars needed to be lightweight. So the Imagineers took opals and stripped them down to custom chassis. The goal was a car weighing just over 1,000 pounds, about a third as much as a regular sedan. To keep the weight down and provide the acceleration the cars would need, they installed a lightweight 1,300cc motorcycle engine that puts out about 152 horsepower. This engine provides maximum power at a minimum weight.
We have a firewall which protects the driver, as well as we have an external alternator to charge the system, 2 large fans to pull air from this compartment out the backside of the car, and we also cool our oil to the engine to keep it cool to save on clutches.
The engine was put behind the driver to provide greater stability during spins and jumps.
The engine had to be behind the driver's seat to make sure the car landed on all 4 tires.
For safety, the gas tank was reduced to the smallest possible size, just big enough to hold a show's worth of gas. These cars were not built for comfort. The interior is stripped down much like a race car.
You have a stock car seat, stock car steering wheels, control dash.
There's none of the normal stuff you'd have in a car like air conditioning or radio or any of that stuff that adds weight. It's just the mechanics that are needed to drive the car.
The Imagineers also designed in some stuff that you wouldn't find in a race car, like pyrotechnics and specially designed controls and switches.
We have pyro loaded onto the car for the show to give bullet hits as well as a effect of a cannon shooting off. You have a speed limiter switch, which gives you 2 different speeds in the car for each jump that this car may take.
The transmission was also specially designed and is definitely unlike anything you find in any kind of car, family sedan, or Indy racer. These cars can go up to 60 miles per hour in reverse.
The shifters in this car are bump shifts, so we got 4 gears going forward and 4 gears going in reverse. You just bump the shifter to shift the gears. In reverse, we have 4 gears give us the torque in the lower end so we can get faster acceleration. We can increase our speed by shifting to higher gears.
The Imagineers also put a specially designed hydraulic brake in the cars, called an e-brake.
It's all hydraulic. It doesn't lock when you put up.
So you can spin the car around and release it quick enough to go straight again.
In fact, the e-brake makes it possible to spin the car around and around a full 540 degrees.
I think the height of the show for the stunt drivers is doing the 540. When you get up into second and third gear and you're doing a high speed and you can spin the car around and put it into reverse and backwards, back up to go the same speed, it's pretty intense. You feel the force in the seat.
Even the tires were designed to meet the specific requirements of the show. They're overinflated to 80 pounds of pressure for their spinning and sliding, and so they can travel on 2 wheels without blowing out the sidewalls. It makes for good stunts, but the tires don't last long.
The tires on these cars burn off like every 15 minutes on a regular surface. Here on the stage, we'll have to change them every 2 shows, so they wear down really, really quick.
The stuntmen's costumes were just as carefully designed as the cars and the set. To make up for the lack of air conditioning and the fierce Florida heat, the drivers wear waterproof vests.
This is that cool suit that we wear underneath our fire suit. It's got little hoses that run all through it. They connect to these 2 hoses, which plug into our water system. And through these hoses circulates cold water from the cooler. And it's a pretty wild feeling when you first turn it on. It's pretty weird. But it's awesome. It lasts for about 30 minutes and keeps your core temperature cold when you're driving these cars, because it does get really, really hot.
During each show, one stuntman was going to get particularly hot. The Burning Man, who catches on fire when his motorcycle skids through a wall of flames.
The equipment that the guy wears can burn forever, pretty much. It's awesome.
First up, 4 layers of body armor and Nomex, a fire-retardant thermal barrier.
And then on top of that Nomex, he'll put on a racing suit like this, a 3-layer racing suit that's soaked in cool gel. And the cool gel acts as a really made like thermal barrier. Then on top of this, he'll wear a burn suit, which is made of a special kind of denim that's stitched with Nomex. And that's what we'll put the fuel on and eventually light him up.
The show officially opened on May 5th, 2005.
From the stands, it looks like everybody's about to wreck, but they're actually putting their cars right in their exact mark. It's pretty spectacular to see.
Coming up, Walt Disney World's newest park, which is home to a tree that's 14 stories high. And building that tree took some truly spectacular engineering magic. The Lights, Motors, Action Extreme Stunt Show came to Walt Disney World as part of Disney's happiest celebration on Earth, 50 years of theme park magic. Modern Marvels, Walt Disney World will return in a moment. Disney's Animal Kingdom, Walt Disney World's 4th largest theme park, opened in April 1998. Covering more than 500 acres, this mammoth theme park is almost the size of Epcot, the Magic Kingdom, and Disney Studios combined. This final park would have amazed even Walt himself. Here, audio animatronic dinosaurs face cataclysmic extinction hundreds of times a day. And in the park's centerpiece attraction, Kilimanjaro Safaris, wild animals range across 110 acres of transplanted African savanna with what appears to be complete freedom of movement. Kilimanjaro Safaris is a huge dry land version of the Jungle Cruise at Disneyland, but the way Walt Disney envisioned it a half-century earlier, using real animals. Walt was fascinated with wild animals. When he built Disneyland back in the 1950s, he originally planned to put actual hippos, giraffes, and monkeys along the banks of the Jungle Cruise.
As we know, animals do whatever they want. So you couldn't, in the short space of time that people would be on the ride, in these small areas that they would be looking at, make sure that these animals would be doing what you'd like them to do or in a place you'd like them to be.
So AAs had to fill the bill at the time. But for Disney's Animal Kingdom, Imagineers finally had the resources and the technology to fully realize Walt's vision.
Kilimanjaro Safaris gives the appearance of being a wild environment that you drive through in a vehicle and you see these animals roaming around. In fact, it is a show set. It's a series of scenes that have been constructed through the manipulation of the landscape environment. There is some edge somewhere that the animals cannot go beyond. So either those edges are invisible to you, the viewer, or in many cases you're looking right at the boundary, but you don't recognize it as a boundary. It might look like a mud earth bank of a river, or a little row of rocks, or you might just notice a little shadow in the grass where unseen to you there could be a hidden moat or trench or fence.
Working with wild animals provides some challenges. To encourage the animals to stay within sight of the vehicles, the Imagineers employed creative tricks, particularly for the lions.
We do a whole variety of things, from providing artificial heat, artificial cooling, sunlight, shade, shadow, water, food, things to do. Animals are like people, they get used to things and you have to try new things. So we were misting for a while. There was this very cool mist that would just land on the rocks up where the lions would sit, and they would like that and they sit there for a while, and then they got bored with that and switched to shade.
By the time the Imagineers started building Disney's Animal Kingdom, they had a lot of experience at turning Florida's swampland into pristine theme parks. But here, they want to create greater authenticity on a grander scale than they had ever before attempted.
This was essentially a flat cow pasture. We actually had cows grazing on the site. We had to actually create every hill, mountain, elevation change that you see on the site.
60 dump trucks of dirt were delivered to the construction site every day for 2 years straight. All told, Disney brought in 4.4 million cubic yards of dirt, enough to fill Spaceship Earth 19 times. With the site prepared, Disney proceeded to install some 4 million plants.
Virtually every living plant that you see in the park was planted by us.
Some they grew themselves from seed, but in accelerators that produced full-size plants in a fraction of the usual time. And some they moved from elsewhere in Walt Disney World.
There were existing stocks of big trees. They had been planted like 25 years ago. And since they're on our property, we can move them. So we were picking up some big trees.
The park's biggest and most significant tree measures 145 feet tall. That's 14 stories high, with a trunk 50 feet in diameter. It's called the Tree of Life. But the Tree of Life isn't a real tree, and it's far from alive. Like Cinderella Castle and Spaceship Earth, the Tree of Life is a highly engineered, technologically sophisticated landmark that dominates the park. Early designs called for a tree about 50 feet high, something kids could climb and play on. Gradually, though, the tree took root and grew, on paper, to 3 times that height. But as the tree grew, so did the problems. For one thing, the Imagineers wanted to tuck an underground theater into the root system.
We needed to create a structure that could not only support the branches and the leaves that you see on the tree, but also to create a 450-seat theater inside of it. So of course we had to have a free-span structure inside, but yet a massive structure to support the tree.
One of our engineers came and said, I have a solution to this problem, and it's really easy. The engineering has been done. Well, what's that? He goes, we'll just use the pre-engineered structure for a Gulf of Mexico oil platform, which is pre-engineered to all the stresses we would ever have and is the right shape.
It was a brilliant solution. The rig was not only strong, it provided plenty of space at the base for the theater. In short order, an oil rig was on its way to Central Florida.
We actually barged it across the Gulf of Mexico, trucked it from Tampa, and erected it in one big piece down on the foundations, on the anchor bolts, and I'm happy to say it fit perfectly.
To transform the massive rig into a tree, steel workers wrapped the structure in a second layer of steel to approximate the contours of a trunk and branches, which would eventually be encased in concrete. Besides the 12 main branches, the tree has 45 secondary branches, 756 tertiary branches, and some 8,000 branches. When the wind blows, the limbs sway realistically, thanks to expansion joints at the base of the main branches. 103,000 specially designed vinyl leaves rustle in the breeze.
The R&D team developed, working with various manufacturers to withstand ultraviolet light and wind, and as you can see, 6 years later, the tree still looks like it did the day we built it.
The tree was also artistically challenging. An intricate montage of more than 300 animal sculptures is carved into the contours of the trunk. It's like a child's Find the Hidden Picture game, scaled up to skyscraper size.
What we did was to sculpt the animals into a foam model of the tree. That sculpting was done really kind of inspirationally, like what does that blob of tree remind me of? And, you know, gee, we don't have enough crabs on the tree, let's do some crabs, and that kind of thing. Very artistic, very much an aesthetic exercise.
Once the artists had done their work, the technical team took over.
Then we sectioned the tree off into little cubes, and each of those little cubes was scanned. And those scans were used to create giant metal and lap cubes, which were then helicoptered in and placed around the tree, and then they're welded together. What you end up with is a metal cage replica, full size, of the little model that you had sculpted.
Artists spent the next 12 months, rain or shine, sculpting the network of animals. Applying a thin coat of cement to the wire framework, an artist would consult a batch of photos and begin to shape the soft concrete, racing to finish the animal's likeness in the 6 or 7 hours before the concrete hardened. Once the sculptures were complete, a year to the day after they were begun, the tree was painted a mottled brown and gray, and then topped with a protective clear coat to ward off ultraviolet fading. As huge and complex as the Tree of Life is, it soon be dwarfed, both physically and technologically, by Expedition Everest. Some of the trees of the African savanna are actually 30-foot-tall southern live oaks, native to Florida. They've been given group cuts to make them look like Africa's acacia trees. Modern Marvel's Walt Disney World will return in a moment. Dinosaurs have been roaming through Disney stories since 1940, when the animated movie Fantasia featured them fighting to the death.
For us, they really do fit into the balance of scientific and fantastic. We like to bring to life things that, prior to going to a Disney theme park, really only existed in your imagination or that you saw in film. And a dinosaur fits that.
So in designing Disney's Animal Kingdom, it was only fitting to include dinosaurs. But as usual, the Imagineers decided to plus it.
They're some of the largest, smoothest, fastest creatures that anybody's ever made.
They owe their speed and motion to yet another advance in audio-animatronic technology.
We went from a 500 PSI hydraulic system on the Otis figures, or 100 PSI pneumatic, to 3,000 psi. So that meant we could put smaller cylinders in. Because they're at higher pressure, they carry a much higher load. Plus, we had compliance on all those figures. So we can get faster speeds, have smaller packages, and have them very fluid.
In Dinosaur, Pete journeyed back in time to capture an iguanodon, which, since this is Disney World, means a massive audio animatronic dinosaur. Disney's Imagineers wanted to create a thrilling sense of action to make people feel like they were climbing boulders, dodging meteors, and getting stuck in the mud. The solution was to build the thrills into the ride vehicle itself.
We named it the EMV, the Enhanced Motion Vehicle. And this particular vehicle has a lot of capabilities. It has four-wheel steering. So right off the bat, you're not your typical truck.
The four-wheel steering allows for tight turns and quick maneuvering, which simulates driving through very rough terrain. The real action, though, comes from hydraulic actuators that move the car body itself, much like in audio animatronics.
What we have here is a motion-based vehicle that is actuated by 3,000 psi of hydraulic pressure. We have 100-gallon tanks that hold the hydraulic fluid, and from there it's sent out through hydraulic lines to the actuators themselves, controlled by the onboard computer.
We have the ability to perfectly coordinate motions of the vehicle with things that are happening around the vehicle. So when something falls next to you and causes a little explosion, you can have the actual vehicle lurch as it's reacting to things around you.
The result is a thrilling race through time and space, dodging meteors and fierce dinosaurs. Hydraulic pressure provides the realistic motion in Dinosaur for both the vehicles and the creatures. For decades, it's been the best way to animate the inanimate. But when Imagineers decided to create the world's most realistic audio animatronic, they had to turn to new technology. The groundbreaking result is Lucky, the first free-roaming audio animatronic ever.
Lucky is a completely different type of technology than our in-ride audio animatronic creatures who, technologically, their chief goal is to do the same thing over and over again, forever and ever and ever. And the engineering is aimed at this idea. Whereas Lucky's chief goal is to react smoothly and convincingly and direct his attention to individuals so that they know that dinosaur's looking at me.
It's the biggest leap in AA since Lincoln first stood at the 1964 World's Fair.
To do this, we had to pretty much reinvent every way that we have created audio animatronics in the past. Since we wanted to free Lucky up from the ground, from the floor, and have him walk around the parks, we went with electric.
Disney employed carbon fiber technology, similar to that used in bicycles and airplanes, to create a strong, lightweight frame. And they formulated a new lightweight latex compound for the skin.
Because it's electric, we have to make sure that everything is lighter. That skin is what we call latex foam. It's a very lightweight structured skin, where if we tried to use any of our other skins that we've used in the past, we couldn't because the weight was too high and the electrical cylinders and motors wouldn't handle that load.
This is the first skin where the guest can walk right up to and actually touch. So the feel of the figure actually had to feel like what you would think a dinosaur would feel like.
Disney also came up with some innovative and highly proprietary software.
This is where we pushed the innovation beyond what anybody had done prior to us. This had to be operated by one person. Everything from eye blink to walking to turning his head. All of those had to be controlled simultaneously in real time in front of guests. That actually is impossible. So to pull it off, we wrote a very sophisticated piece of software that actually co-puppets the figure with the human. So it's a human and a piece of software or a computer that is bringing Lucky to life whenever you see him out on stage.
The results are remarkably lifelike, even to the people who created it.
I kid you not, the team that works on Lucky take Lucky very seriously. They view this as a living creature. They ask how he's doing in the morning, how does he feel.
There's only one Lucky so far, and he's spending time in several Disney theme parks around the world. In the fall of 2005, he helped open Hong Kong Disneyland. One reason Walt loved his theme parks was because, as he put it, they would never be finished. They would always be evolving, improving, and growing. One of the most ambitious attractions now taking shape is Expedition Everest, whose steel frame summit towers 199 feet above Disney's Animal Kingdom, more than 50 feet higher than the Tree of Life, and 10 feet higher than Cinderella Castle. Expedition Everest will contain a roller coaster thrill ride inside the mountain, and thus join Disney's long chain of roller coasters housed inside mountains. Space Mountain is the most famous, but the first was the Matterhorn at Disneyland. In fact, the Matterhorn made roller coaster history when it debuted in 1959.
Roller coasters originally were always made of wood, and they would have flat steel plates attached to the top of the wood and to the sides of the wood. This had to go inside a Matterhorn mountain. There was no way to do the conventional woodwork. What's the easiest thing to bend? Well, you know you can bend electric conduit pretty simple. They figured you could take pipe. You could bend pipe, and then you could weld it together with ties between the rails. It was nothing more than a simple expedient of how to get this done easy. Voila, they accidentally invented the first of that type of roller coaster.
Since then, almost all roller coasters have been made of curved steel, allowing for tighter turns and faster speeds. Expedition Everest will be made the same way, but on a huge scale.
The roller coaster is a traditional gravity roller coaster. It uses a chain lift and very, very large motors to lift the train to the top of the mountain, where gravity then takes over, and we have all the stored energy of a train full of passengers at 100 feet in the air, and the amount of energy that large mass has at that height.
Creating a mount to enclose a ride this huge is no easy task.
The mountain is a complicated structure. On the outside, it looks like a mountain. That's very nice, but in fact, it's three independent architectural systems. There's a rigid system which holds up the concrete of the mountain and is, by definition, absolutely rigid. There's a flexible, dynamic system, which is the ride track, which, because this multi-ton vehicle is moving on, that ride track has to move, but it can never touch the mountain. Those two systems can't touch each other, but they have to be built simultaneously, so the steel of one is actually penetrating through the steel of the other, and if you put one little piece of steel in at the wrong time, you've stopped your entire construction process.
We poured a very, very large mat foundation over an acre of concrete, over 3 feet thick, to spread the load of both of those two structures, and then we began the construction of the roller coaster and exoskeleton, the mountain static structure, at the same time.
Further complicating things is a giant Yeti, the mythical guardian of the mountains.
The Yeti is so big that the Yeti is sitting on his own independent architectural structure that goes all the way to the footings of the building and cannot touch either the ride structure or the existing architectural structure of the mountain. And all of these things had to be simultaneously constructed because they're all big. You can't put one in after you've built the other one.
Disneyland's Matterhorn also features Yeti, but the one at Expedition Everest will be both huge and incredibly nasty. For now, he's a closely guarded secret.
Our Yeti is gritty, real Yeti with, slobber and wet legs from walking in and out of the snow and matted dreadlock hair and, a real animal, an animal that you see for a very brief moment, but when you see it, you think, wow, was that really real?
Once Everest's basic structures were in place, workers began creating the rockwork. Although this mountain is no more encased in rock than the Tree of Life is covered in bark.
The mountain structure is covered with over 5 acres of themed carved rockwork. The matrix of plaster that's carved to replicate as closely as possible the geological rock forms that you would find in the Himalayas. From here, we're actually seeing some of the scaffolding on the exterior of the mountain. That scaffolding is used to provide access to the workers to install the lath, which is the matrix that the plaster is applied to, and then carve that plaster and then finally paint it.
Thousands and thousands of construction workers from Central Florida working on the project, and it's like conducting an orchestra.
After 3 years of construction, the mountain will finally be complete, and Expedition Everest will open to the public. At Disney, it's been said, no good idea is ever allowed to die. Expedition Everest seems to bear that out. It's another huge expansion on the theme park concept Walt first unveiled at Disneyland. A lot has happened in the 4 decades since Walt Disney first sketched out his idea for his biggest and most ambitious project ever. Walt Disney World is huge and complex, and is tall, that's wrapped around an oil rig. Linear synchronous motors that launch a vehicle from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 3 seconds. 9 acres of hidden tunnels. Journey underground, backstage, and backstory at the technological marvel that is Walt Disney World. Next on Modern Marvels.
A vista into a world of wondrous ideas, signifying man's achievement, a step into the future, with predictions of constructive things to come.
Enter a make-believe world spanning some 27,000 acres and brought to life by cutting-edge technology. What was once swampland now boasts the world's largest theme park. The ride technology ranges from space-age centrifuges to enhanced motion vehicles powered by 3,000 psi of hydraulic pressure. And hundreds of audio animatronics live through the power of pneumatics, hydraulics, and electrical systems.
Our technology in the field of robotics really is evolutionary, beginning 40 years ago, and continues today building on that.
Walt Disney World is made up of 4 separate theme parks, each with its own innovations. The first, the 107-acre Magic Kingdom, was born in secrecy when Disney purchased thousands of acres of land anonymously. The Magic Kingdom conceals complex tunnels that are the invisible arteries of the park. Transportation, costuming, computer controls, and even a high-speed garbage collection system are all hidden 14 feet below ground. Epcot, which is 3 times the size of the Magic Kingdom, is a never-ending World's Fair, a tribute to science, technology, and world culture. At the entrance soars the 18-story tall Spaceship Earth, a 16 million pound geodesic sphere glittering with 11,000 facets. A new attraction called Soarin' gives visitors the sights, smells, and best of all, the feel of hang gliding over California. And at the end of every day, the Illumination Show unleashes propane flames and over 1,000 computer-timed fireworks and sends a 350,000-pound globe spinning across the park's central lagoon.
That particular sequence of pyrotechnic effects had never been attempted before.
Just a few miles away, Disney MGM Studios is a salute to the golden days of Hollywood. The Twilight Zone Tower of Terror is a haunted hotel with one extremely unpredictable elevator. Thanks to an advanced T4 computer program, each lurching journey is completely different.
The computer will actually decide for you. And associated with that, not only is the motion changed, but all show elements changed.
The Lights, Motors, Action Extreme Stunt Show sends lightweight, high-speed cars spinning 540 degrees and sailing off ramps both forward and backward. The newest park, the 500-acre Disney's Animal Kingdom, is almost 5 times the size of the Magic Kingdom. Disney planted 4 million plants to turn a Central Florida cow pasture into an African savanna. And the park's central icon has a very unusual structural support, an oil rig. On the 100-acre safari ride, African animals look like they're wandering free.
In fact, it is a show set. It's a series of scenes that have been constructed through the manipulation of the landscape environment.
Disney's Animal Kingdom is also home to Expedition Everest. At nearly 200 feet tall, it towers over Disney's other mountains, Thunder, Space, and Splash, and is home to a high-tech, high-speed roller coaster. The 4 parks are all part of this megaplex of a resort. twice the size of Manhattan, it was the final vision and crowning achievement of a man who spent more than 40 years pushing the limits of technology to create entertainment magic. Walt Disney. Born in 1901, Walter Elias Disney spent his youth in Missouri. From an early age, Walt wanted to be a cartoonist, and by his 20s, he had his own Hollywood animation studio. His partner was his brother Roy, who ran the business side of the operation. From the very beginning, Walt used cutting-edge technology to create more compelling stories. In 1928, he produced Steamboat Willie, the world's first animated talkie. In 1932, he dazzled audiences with Flowers and Trees, the world's first cartoon in Technicolor, and the first to win an Oscar. And with Snow White, he proved that animation was strong enough to carry a feature-length film.
I said, how do you do?
How do you do what?
He was about creating ever-increasingly immersive stories. So he took storybooks and created animated films, and in each of those animated films, he continued to push innovative ways to increase the immersion into those films. So stereo sound, color, feature length.
He always hired the best, and Walt was always pushing them to do more and more and plus it, as they said, plus it in the way that the scenes are done and the way the animation moves. And they did better work than I thought they were capable of.
He may have been an artist, but Disney thought like an engineer. When he wanted to create a greater depth of field in his animated films, and thus a greater sense of realism, he worked with his staff to come up with a solution. In just a few months, they invented and patented a sophisticated animation camera called the multi-plane camera.
The individual pieces of artwork are stacked certain distances apart depending how deep you want the scene to look, and the camera is placed above, and the pieces of artwork are moved in towards the camera to simulate the camera panning through dimensional space.
Walt's next leap in storytelling took him out of the animator studio and into a California art grove. In the early 1940s, as he sat on a dirty park bench and watched his daughters ride carousel, Walt had an idea.
There should be something built, some kind of an amusement enterprise built where the parents and the children could have fun together.
He decided to create a place unlike anything the world had ever seen. In 1953, he purchased 160 acres near Anaheim, California, and set about building the world's first theme park. He gathered up some of his most creative talent and dubbed them Imagineers.
On our first television program, we showed you a blueprint for a dream. Well, this is the blueprint, and the dream is Disneyland.
Walt decided early on that the park's various attractions should radiate outward from a convenient central hub. Guests would be drawn to the hub by a dramatic landmark. And given the success of Disney's first feature-length animated film, Snow White, the landmark had to be a castle. This soaring castle would be surrounded by rides themed to Disney movies. Park construction began July 21st, 1954 at a feverish pace.
The early days of the construction of Disneyland seemed sort of like a heartless task. It was nothing but a bunch of orange trees coming down and dirt and bulldozers and chaos and construction equipment and cement trucks. I've never seen so much madness in my life.
The park opened less than 1 year later with all the fanfare Walt Disney could muster. But it was far from his greatest premiere.
It was a disaster. In the first place, Walt could control everything except the weather. And it was one of the hottest days of the year in Anaheim. So the women's spiked heels were sinking into the freshly laid asphalt. They ran out of soft drinks. There were not enough drinking fountains. The rides broke down. Some smart fellow counterfeited about 10,000 tickets. And so the place was jammed and it was a mess.
And the next day it was like, oh my goodness, we have to go down there again. Everything's broken. We're going to have to take it apart. We're going to have to fix it. And we were in for a long summer.
The summer wasn't that long. After a few weeks of ironing out the kinks, Walt's new park became a smash hit. Every day, thousands of people came to see mechanical animals lurking in the jungle, Dumbos that really flew, and a 5/8 scale Main Street that felt like a real thing. Once again, Walt had succeeded in combining technology with great storytelling.
The theme park is the first experience wherein the audience can actually walk through the frame into the story and participate in that story in a way that was entirely unique. It went from being a passive experience to an active experience.
Disneyland was an unqualified success, but Walt still wasn't satisfied. Outside the gates of his carefully constructed make-believe world, a disorganized mass of hotels, motor courts, and diners sprang up, breaking the Disney magic. And inside, practical concerns like garbage collection and employee transportation also spoiled the illusion. Walt knew he could do better, and he vowed to. It was 1964, and something strange was going on in the central part of Florida. Large parcels of useless swampland near the tiny town of Orlando were being bought up, but nobody knew why, or by whom.
There was a lot of speculation in the Central Florida area as to who was purchasing that much and why would they be doing it.
Floridians may have been in the dark, but out in California, Walt Disney knew exactly what was going on. In a cloak and dagger mission rivaling the best spy novels, he was acquiring land for a massive new theme park that would dwarf Disneyland.
Walt Disney's name was pretty well known to the general public, and certainly if it had been released that Walt was purchasing that much property here in Florida, well, that's certainly going to change the price tag.
Walt chose Orlando because it offered year-round good weather, easy access to major roads, and thousands of acres of land at only $180 an acre. Using false company names like Tomahawk Properties and Latin American Development, Walt and his representatives shuttled in and out of Central Florida, carefully covering their tracks.
He hired attorney Bob Foster to, not under the Disney name, come down and acquire much of the land. Bob would always return to California, traveling through different airports along the way.
Finally, in the fall of 1965, the Orlando newspaper got the scoop. "We Say It's Disney" screamed a huge headline. Neighboring swampland immediately shot up to $1,000 an acre. The Florida Project, all 27,443 acres of it, was out in the open. At a hastily arranged press conference, along with the governor of Florida, Walt announced a huge undertaking. He wasn't just building an East Coast Disneyland. He was creating an entire Disney World, his most ambitious and technologically innovative enterprise ever. But the project almost died before the first shovelful of earth was turned. And now, Walt's dream is put on hold, while the Imagineers grapple with whether to press on in the face of an unforeseen crisis. Due to the success of Disneyland and Walt Disney World, more Disney destinations were built in Paris, Tokyo, and Hong Kong. Modern Marvels, Walt Disney World will return in a moment. In 1966, Walt Disney launched the biggest project of his career. A massive theme park situated in the middle of 27,000 acres in Central Florida.
What you can see on this master plan, the theme park and all the other tourist facilities fill just one small area of our enormous Florida project.
Walt envisioned several theme parks, hotels, golf courses, and thousands of acres left in their natural state. His dreams were every bit as big as the acreage he had purchased. But he never seen these dreams completed. On December 15, 1966, Walt Disney died from cancer.
The first 2 months after Walt died, it was sort of like, well, Walt's just away Walt's just away for a while. Walt will be back for vacation, and then we'll get on with the next thing that we're going to do.
The Disney company was devastated. Without their charismatic leader, many felt Disney World couldn't be built.
It took us about a year to to convince Roy O. Disney and the rest of the management of the Walt Disney Company that there was a lot of talent here that had worked with Walt Disney for many years and that we could do this project.
Finally, in 1967, Roy Disney, Walt's brother and business partner, decided to move ahead with Disney World. The first project would be a theme park modeled after Disneyland, but more than twice as large. It would be called the Magic Kingdom. Construction officially began in April of 1969. But the Magic Kingdom didn't happen with a wave of the wand. It was more like a military conquest. In fact, the battle to build Walt Disney World and the Magic Kingdom was commanded by a Navy admiral and an Army general. General Joe Potter had overseen the operation of the Panama Canal and the 1964 World's Fair, and Admiral Joe Fowler had built Disneyland for Walt a decade before.
They weren't perfect for the job. Joe Fowler was especially perfect from a construction standpoint because he understood how to work with the Imagineers and all the creative talent and all the engineers.
Their first challenge was to convert hundreds of acres of swampy land into rolling hills and sparkling waterways. They started by digging into Bay Lake, 400 acres of reeds, muck, and swamp grass, lined with 14 feet of rotted roots.
They drained the lake and went down and dug out a good layer of muck and mire that was down in the lake bottom.
After 18 months of moving more than 8 million cubic yards of dirt, the largest private construction project in the country, they were ready to pour concrete. But the concrete work wasn't for any of the landmark structures visitors today would recognize. In fact, it wasn't for structures any guests were ever supposed to see. Back during the early days of Disneyland, Walt once saw Frontierland cowboys sauntering through Tomorrowland, which utterly destroyed the futuristic sci-fi mood. To avoid that kind of culture clash at Walt Disney World, the Imagineers designed a network of tunnels to service the park. They were called utilidors, utility corridors.